the locations, the characters, the circumstances. That is all the technical bit. But the problem statement, the challenges, the struggles, the change, the guru that comes in and changes the character, that's all the emotional side of it. So in a story you need the technicals, which is the stage, you need the emotional, which is the drama, and then there's a payoff. There's a reason why fairy tales are so famous. Because a fairy tale always ends with a moral and ends with the character changing. For good, most often good. Because there are movies which can show decline in the character's condition. They are what we call the character movies or the drama movies, like let's say Gangs of Wasseypur, what we call character sketch movies. But yes, they have lesser fan following because let's be honest, humans love good endings. We love fairy tales, and this is why most movies have positive endings. The stage. Now, stage is all about setting the 3 C's, which is the curiosity, the characters, and the circumstance. What's curiosity here? There's a reason why movies start in the middle of action often. They don't start with a big black banner saying that you're about to watch a movie where at some point a robbery is going to take place. It doesn't happen that way. They start with putting you right in some action. The idea is to build your curiosity. This is why speakers start with a question. Speakers start with the reason why I always in those parts say, let's start with a question. That you start with a question, wow, that's good. Is questions build on curiosity. Often a question is a precursor to what's going to come in your speech. For example, if I ask you, have you ever been a hero without words? Or if I say, have you ever saw a hero who have influenced you without words? And then perhaps I will bring at some point a character who has influenced me by words. So the question actually is a precursor to what's going to come. That's building curiosity. Once you make your audience curious, it's called tapping. I use it in my evaluate to elevate words as well. It's called tap and transport model. It's by Craig Valentine, who's the 1999 world champion. And the idea is simple. You tap into your audience's world, and usually the tap is by a question. Before you transport them into your world, before you start your story. Because once you make your audience curious to hear more, the transport to your story is effortless. You don't have to demand their attention, they give their attention to you. So, there was a speaker at that contest, and he has this speech about a jacket, about that embroidered jacket. And my suggestion was that what if I tell that, have you ever got a gift which you haven't liked? People may have got gifts, they will raise their hands. I got a gift too, and it was an embroidered jacket. But this jacket was special, it changed my life. The idea is to make the audience curious about how a jacket has changed his life and then transport to the story. So tap and transport. So curiosity is number 1. As soon as you make the audience curious, most often not, you need to now set the stage. And since we are humans, stage means setting characters. Perhaps if you were dogs or cats, we will set up dogs and cats to characters, but here humans have to come in. And usually the very first minute, characters need to be established, because in most Toastmaster speeches, you only have 5 to 7 minutes of total speech runtime. So the technicals need to be very fast. The first 30 seconds, you make them curious, and then you bring in your characters. In storytelling model, we often say start with a location and an action. And that's a good way to set the stage, to set the technicals. For example, I can always say that 2 things in storytelling. Talk in present tense as much as possible, and start the story with a location and action. I will give you an example here. If I say that I'm standing next to a red pole on the busy streets of New Delhi, and a car zooms in by, can you see me standing next to a red pole and a car zooming by? What if I say something like that? I was standing on, the thing is, standing over here is the action. And what's the location? Next to a red pole. The idea of starting with location and action is, because you only have words as a speaker, it puts the audience right in the middle of your scene. There's a very famous speaker in the US, Patricia Fripp. She often says that it does not matter what you say, it matters what your audience sees when you say it. If I had said that I am standing in a busy street, it's very difficult. Can you see the blurriness in your mind now? Where am I standing? Where did the audience position me? So if I say I'm sitting in a cafe, that's one way. Or I can also say that I'm sitting on the back in the cafe, and okay, even if you see the cafe part is also, because the thing is that you don't have to be too descriptive, the audience will fill in. When I say cafe, perhaps Diksha will see a certain cafe, she knows. Shubham will see a certain cafe. The idea is that you just give a hint and let the audience fill the rest for you. It matters what they see when you say it, not what you say. So start with location and action, and that's a good way to set the characters and a circumstance. Once the 3 C's are done, that is, you have made them curious to hear your speech, you have brought in the characters, and those characters could be you, and let's say, as an example, let's say if I talk like this, that have you ever seen a hero who has inspired you without words? The same happened with me 3 years back. I'm sitting at my office, and the manager walks in, and he asks, Pulkit, where is the work I just gave you yesterday? So now the curiosity bit has been made, and soon as the curiosity was logged in, now I'm sitting in my office, the manager has walked in, the characters are being introduced. And the circumstances, the manager is asking me, where is the work I gave you yesterday? The entire idea of the very first minute, the 3 C's, is to make your audience start listening to you. Because as humans, we cannot demand attention from audience. The audience will give or not give. That's the only way. Once that is done, before I go to the 4th C, there are 6 C's in storytelling model. Before I go to 4th C, let me ask you, what do you think is the one ingredient that makes a story compelling to hear or a movie compelling to watch? What is that one ingredient according to you which makes it worthwhile? I will give you 2 examples. Let's say there's a movie 1 where the character is happy-go-lucky at the start, is happy-go-lucky in the middle, and is happy-go-lucky in the end. That's movie 101. Second movie is the character is happy-go-lucky in the start, the character faces some extreme struggle, depression, dilemma at the end. He cannot just imagine him living anymore, but at the end he's back to be happy-go-lucky. Which movie will you consider more watchable?
Second.
Movie 2. Why?
Because of the changes in circumstances.
It's like an easier machine. If it's flat, it's dead. But there were some highs and lows.
It's more engaging.
Made it more.
It's curious to know the next part.
Right. How does the character go from being suicidal to again getting happy-go-lucky? That's the idea. The idea is that there is no story without a struggle. If in your story there's no struggle, it's a waste of audience's time. If I'm someone who was a good speaker at the start, if I'm someone who's a good speaker in the end, I'm someone who's a good speaker in the middle and the end, the audience will like, hum kya kare? You were always like this. Why even tell us something which is of no value to us? But if in my childhood I was a good speaker, but soon insecurities and nervousness and anxiety made me hate the stage in my teenage years, but then in my adulthood I rediscovered the joy of public speaking, the audience might ask how. How did that happen? The struggle makes a story. There's no story without struggle. The 4th C is conflict. The fourth C is conflict. If there is no conflict in your speech, that's a problem. Because the conflict makes it watchable. It means the most famous movies you see, like say Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, it's a very classic romance movie. Imagine that he went to the bride's dad and asked her hand, and she said, "All right, she's yours." Movie ends. It won't be as fun to watch, right? There was conflict, there were challenges, they were running around, and at the end of the conflicts, a climax came where ultimately he got the bride. You watch movies or you hear speeches when there is conflict. The conflict has three categories. One is we call it the vocator conflict. The second is what we call the escalator conflict. And the fourth is what we call the elevator conflict. I will give you a very famous example of vocator conflict first. Have you heard of this famous Lucknow tradition that pehle aap? Now, what if you're watching a speech and the entire 7 minutes is he going to a room and saying, "You go first," and he's like, "No, you go first." And he said, "You go first." He said, "No, you go first. You go first, you go first." And this goes on for 5 minutes. Wouldn't be asking that, "Come on, man, proceed." There's a conflict. We don't know this man, there are two people, and they're confused who will go first. There's a conflict, there's a problem statement. But the problem intensity stays the same from start to finish. Compared to the story starts, and I say, "You go first," and he says, that's again a conflict. I said you go first and he just hit me. But would it be incongruent? Why? How can a person hit you without an elevator conflict? Where the conflict escalates too fast. Compared to, I say, "You go first," and say, "Pulkit, no, you go first." I say, I implore you, go first. "Pulkit, I'm serious, man, go first. But I want you, enough is enough, go first." Does that feel more natural? That's called the escalator conflict. The conflict is escalating, but it's escalating in a human way. There is more resonance, more congruence. In your speech, use the escalator conflict model, because if you make the conflict stay the same, the audience will lose you. They will like, "Yaar, maza nahi aaya." If you escalate the conflict too high, they're like, "What's happening?" But if you make it escalator conflict, it will feel natural. Remember, most of speeches, I say this often, that public speaking is more psychological than anything else. It's about making your audience trust you. This is why we have this ethos, pathos, and logos in speeches. Ethos is the audience must see you as credible. Pathos is the audience must be emotionally touched by your words. And logos is there should be logic in what you're speaking. I cannot just inspire you and say that, "Hey, I'm going to Mars and today I will open up a portal and you all will know." The logos will be broken. I may have inspired you, but it will be like, what happens is. So it has to be a complete saga of credibility, ethos, emotional pull, pathos, and logos. And the escalator conflict model helps with the pathos. When the audience can see the conflict escalating in a natural, humane way, they are with you at a human level. Because most people have experienced such escalating conflict. Once the conflict has been set, the conflict will escalate. And what happens at the end of conflict? The DDLJ movement, climax happens. The climax is when your conflict at what we call the battle at the boiling point. It's when the audience will be like, "Yaar, aarya baar, up to what's going to happen now?" If the audience at some point in your speech asks this, you have already won. You've already won. Have you watched Sanskriti Acharya's District 41 winning speech? The lady who won District 41 ISC? what happens in a story? She used this escalating conflict to, and ultimately she won semi-final. She got into semi-finals as well. But I will tell you her story in a 1 minute arc of how did she employ this escalating conflict model. In her story, the conflict starts when she sets, first she sets the character, that she sets a big brother who is exercising.
Uncle.
Sorry?
Uncle.
Uncle. She sets her uncle and she asks her uncle that what is power? And his uncle says, this is power. And then a few weeks later she goes to school and her teacher says, education is power. Conflict is set. What is power? So the audience is now reeled in. Then once the conflict is set up, the conflict escalates. At some point, she starts growing and she keeps on hearing various opinions that this is power, that is power, and she's confused. So now she's a very confused girl. And at some point, at 12 years of age, she goes to a school, and there is Children's Day program. And she sees her friends crying. When she goes to her friend, she says she has been molested by a teacher in the school. Her conflict is now brewing. It has now increased from a girl just curious, confused. Now it has happened that someone has been molested, 12-year-old. She decides to confront the teacher. She goes to the second floor, and the teacher, and ultimately the teacher pins her to the wall. And she says, if you open your mouth once more, there will be consequences. Now the conflict escalated to a point, either the girl will submit, which the audience does not want. Will you want her to submit? No. Or she will change. She decides to change. She shouts her voice out, and teachers gather, and then she realizes that her voice is power, that she is power. She won, ultimately. She won the quarterfinals and the semifinals. That's conflict escalation model. Imagine she had started with this at the very start, then the audience would be too much pressure, right? When she started, I went to school and saw this girl crying. Too much for the audience to handle. It started with a very innocent girl asking her uncle what is power, and a humorous uncle saying that this is power. This is why we use the conflict escalation model. You want the audience to be comfortable first before you throw them into a life or death situation where you're rooting for the character. It could be a simple story as well, that me starting at school and going on the stage, and at some point, so if I just think of a conflict over here right now, a conflict would be, for example, you going to a school event and just running up. A child is running up because as a child you cannot think of you being on stage, and it could be a fun event. But at some point, let's say it escalates to a point where you either take the stage, or your family suffers, or you lose a big opportunity, or you lose the opportunity to lead the people you care about. At some point, if you make this conflict escalate to a point where taking the stage is now a life or death situation, the audience will start rooting for you that, hey, take it now. Now is your time, be on the stage, own it. And when you can do that, you can imagine, right, the audience is with you, so you're winning the stage. This is why we see that start with a lesser intense conflict, it could be a fun one, and escalate to a point where the audience starts rooting for you. Escalating conflict model. And remember that there's no story without struggle. So if you're bringing conflict in your story, you've already won your audiences. But now, once you bring in the conflict, now imagine this. I bring the conflict in, that I am standing at the edge of the stage. I see the big bright lights looking back at me, and the speaker announces, and the next guest is Gupta. I look at the speaker and I imagine waves of emotions flooding me, of all these years where I have yearned to be in the spotlight, but I have never been one. I look at the speaker and I decide I cannot do it, and I walk out. Thank you. If I end the story like this, there will be a punch, right? There will be some incongruence in the audience's mind. What happened? So this is called, if you bring in the problem, And if you leave the audiences with the problem, it's a disservice to your audience. So once you bring in a problem, what you have to do is, you have to bring in solution. And this is what we call the cure, the fifth C. So, characters, circumstances, curiosity, the technicals, conflict, and the fifth is cure. Let me ask you this, that if I bring in a speech where I have a problem and I find a solution and I go on to be nice, versus I bring in a speech where I have a problem and ultimately I'm at a point where I don't know what solution, but someone comes in and helps me, and then I have a payoff. Which will be more relatable? Where I have the problem, I have the solution, versus I have a problem and I go out reaching for help and then find a solution. Which do you think is more relatable to the audience? Why? Why do you think it's more relatable? Thank you for the answer. Why do you think it's more relatable?
Because it is very rare that a single man army can solve all this problem on their own, but it is very human to go and reach out for help and getting help and then getting to a solution. It is more relatable.
Absolutely. Like I said, most of public speaking is psychological. So it may be in real life you found a solution. But if you think about it, right? Even when we find a solution, the voice inside is often of someone else. It may be of your teacher, it may be of your dad, it may be of your mom, it may be of a friend. Often in the quieter moments when you find the solution, the voice inside is often from a book, from a movie, from a teacher. So we are never born with solutions. People around us at some point give us the solution, and maybe at later point in life that comes rushing in. By the way, this is also called a very famous speech model. We call it discovery. I'll just be digressing. So let's pause at cure now. Let me also give you this, what I'm talking about. It's called a discovery, realization, application now. That's one way to write speeches as well. Now the storytelling model is our focus today, the 6 C's. Till now they are cure. The first 3 were curiosity, character, circumstance, conflict, cure. But there's a lot of different ways to talk about the truth. The truth can be talked about in many ways, right? One other model is called discovery, realization, application. And very simple. Has there been any moment in your life where someone gave you advice and you were like, I don't agree that this is bad advice for me, it does not apply to me, but later on you realize the importance of an advice? Simple, Shumas says here. For example, has your mom ever asked you to study and you were like, I'm not going to study, and did you realize that pad gaya hoga? That's a simple truth of life. We discover many advices, but we're not always ready to accept those advices. The teacher appears only when the student is ready. So when the student is not ready, there may be a lot of discovery, advices may be given, but the realization only happens at some later point. Since public speaking is a lot of psychology, when we use this discovery, realization, application model, it also tugs the audience's heart, because they can say, I got his advice, but I rejected it. And I had to realize some more. For example, in one of my speeches I do this. I actually, again, bring in that my mom asked me to study and I was talking to my girlfriend and I was like, I'm too young. I'm too young to, I will always study later. And then I bring in a point where I see happy faces around me, all getting selected in the colleges they want. And I'm here, all stranded. And my mom's words come ringing to my head. Pulkit, if you don't respect opportunities, opportunity won't respect you. One of my speeches, I do this. It's called, often the realization comes ringing, right? This is why we use the ringing word. But that's another way. The cure part actually is a manifestation of that realization. The cure is when someone swoops in, we call it guru, and pulls you out of the conflict. I'll give you an example here. For example, let's say there's a speech where the conflict is escalated to a point where I'm about to go on the stage, but I finally give up. That the emotional upheaval is too much for me to handle. Because I'm thinking about all those moments where I've tried to go on stage but always failed. And today it might be my big day. I'm just being called on stage. I know if I go on the stage today, my life will change, but I cannot. The upheaval is too much. I cannot handle it. But then a friend comes in and says that, Pulkit, you have got it. You have got it. I know that it's tough for you, but today is your day. There's no going back. You have got this. I'm going to stand here and won't allow you to back out. This is not an optimal way, it was too long, but you get the idea. And then I have to go on stage. That guru has to come in ultimately. The guru gives you an advice which changes your life. That's it. The guru gives you an advice which changes your life. One of the speeches, 2020 World Champion Mike Carr, so in Toastmasters, every year there's World Championship for speaking. Now Mike Carr, who is 2020 World Champion, his speech was Mrs. Montgomery and the Librarian. And one of his speeches, in that speech, the idea is that he has broken his school's projector. And he's from a very poor family. So his teacher, Mrs. Montgomery, okay, the story was like this, that he's watching a movie on the school projector and the projector breaks down. He volunteers to fix it. His class teacher, Mrs. Montgomery, says, okay, go and fix it. But in the process of fixing it, he breaks it. And the librarian comes and says that what did you do? That if you do not fix it by tomorrow, then your parents have to pay for it. And he ultimately could not fix it. So he goes home, he's all night, he's just thinking that, how do I tell my parents that they have to pay for this? And when he goes, at some point, I don't know if I'm putting the story, but at some point his teacher comes in and says that, don't worry Mike, the victory is in the try, not the result. The victory is in the try, the victory is not in the result. So his thinking changes from that point on. The idea of such words coming from an external character is what we call the introduction of a guru. Remember that if you bring in a conflict, you have to bring in the cure, and the cure must come from a guru. And the guru could be a person, the guru could be from a book, it could be a movie, it could be a friend, it could be a spouse, it could be a mom, dad. But the idea is the lesson should come from external. And once the lesson comes in, there has to be what we call the last scene, the change. Once the lesson comes in, the character now has to change, and the change has to be emotional. The change has to be what we call, it's like the character changing emotionally. Not the character changing his outfit, the character changing emotionally. And once the change happens, the audience gets satisfied. And at the end is what you often hear, we call about a payoff or the call to action, is when you now have changed and you ask the audience to change with you. And since you have given them a reason that doing this will change them because it changed you, when you give a call to action towards the end, the audience is more receptive. And this is why you often hear that start with the question, you want to make it curious, end with the call to action, you want to make the audience take something with them. This is trifecta in public speaking. You have to make your speech actionable, memorable, and relatable. Relatability is story. And this is why all evaluators say, where's the personal story? Because a personal story is what makes the speech relatable. The audience, when you tell a story the right way, the audience actually lives your story from their perspective. That's the power of relatability. Actionable and memorable. Memorability is memorability could be a spectrum. One way to make a speech memorable is to use what we call a foundational phrase. For example, in Mike Carr's speech, he keeps on repeating, victory is not the result, my friend. Victory is not in the result, my friend. Victory is in the try. Once his teacher gives him this foundational message, he keeps on repeating it at certain intervals. And guess what? He ends the speech with, victory is not in the result, my friend, or victory is in the try. And thank you. This is called making your speech memorable. If your message sticks with your audience towards the very end, your job as a speaker is complete. This is why we call the message the foundational phrase. A foundational phrase should be less than 10 words. Ideally, should rhyme if possible, like my way or the highway, or small change often. Use words that rhyme. There's a book, Thinking Fast and Slow, by Daniel Kahneman, and it talks about that how the best public speakers on the planet, they use what we call the internal rhyme. You cannot use the external rhyme in your speech. For example, let us say that I went to play and he got to say, where's the hay? If I do something like public speech, it will be confused. What's happening? They won't take you seriously. But if I use words like change small, change often, it's also a rhyme with important. It's called an internal rhyme. The change is an internal rhyme. If I say the favorite color of you is blue, that's again internal rhyme. You, blue. There's a book by Randy Harvey. I will encourage you as a side note to explore about rhetorical devices. This internal rhyme is a rhetorical device. The world champion Randy Harvey, who is a 2004 world champion, he was a literature PhD. He has this book, 101 Public Speaking Messages That Matter. If you wish, do read his book. It's on Amazon. Randy Harvey, and he talks about many rhetorical devices. Do you know what rhetorical devices? Do you know what's rhetorical devices? Have you heard words like alliteration, similes, metaphors?
Yeah.
That's poetic devices or rhetorical devices. That's rhetorical devices. So, do you know what's a simile? He was as quick as a bee. That's a simile. Do you know what's metaphor?
Metaphor is describing a thing without using writing.
Absolutely, that's right. He was the Shah Rukh Khan of the world. That's metaphor. So when you use like or as, that becomes simile. Comparing someone with something else, abstraction. So that's when you do with the words like and as, that becomes simile. When you just say he was the Amitabh Bachchan of the world, you can imagine him being tall and strong and something like that. So that's called a metaphorical construct. But there are also rhyming, internal rhyme, external rhyme. There is alliteration. For example, alliteration. Have you heard of what's alliteration?
Same word in
The same
first
consonant.
letter. The first letter is consonant.
We do have a poet among us. So like big, beautiful and bold. That's alliteration. Charismatic, confident, and some word with C. That's again alliteration. So speakers use this in their speeches, and the reason you get pulled in is that Abraham Lincoln's there's a speech by Abraham Lincoln, Gettysburg Address, the Gettysburg Address. It's considered the greatest speech in the history of public speeches. It's a 2-minute speech, the Gettysburg Address, and this is when he delivered after his army defeated the opposing armies. So it was a civil war in the US, the slavery war, which Abraham Lincoln ended. And after the win, he delivered what we call the Gettysburg Address. If you see that speech, that's the greatest speech in the history of speeches, it's full of rhetorical devices. Your best speakers, be it Dhananjay Trachi or Mohammed Katani or anyone, TED speeches, they often use rhetorical devices and you get subconsciously pulled in. But once you start seeing consciously, you will see that they're using alliteration, they're using rhyming, they're using metaphors, similes. It's strewn around. Echo. For example, have you heard, if I say, have you ever been to Bali? If I say, have echo is when you use the same word again and again. Like, are you ready to change your life? Are you ready to write better speeches? Are you ready to tell better stories? The word are you, that's echo. And it just creates a sense of urgency, right? It gets your excitement up. That's echo. So learn rhetorical devices. As a side note, there will be a lot of side notes in my speeches as things come to my mind. But yes, rhetorical devices, we're on the payoff part. Actionable, relatable, memorable. Memorability comes from rhetorical devices often, and ensuring you have a foundational phrase. If you've ever heard an evaluation where the speaker said your title did not come in your content, that's the speaker asking you to make your speeches memorable. Like, if my speech title is, I see something. If you hear his speech, he uses the word I see something at various points in his speech. That's the idea of making your speech memorable. In one of my speeches, humorous speeches, my title is GMTMC. It's a humorous speech, and the full form is Girlfriend Master Toastmasters Club. It's a humorous speech, so it's a exaggerated tale about me going to Google, and Sundar Pichai giving me this GMTMC, and I going there. But at the end of my speech, what happened was, everyone was saying, Pulkit, when are you giving this membership GMTMC? It happened so many times in the speeches. The thing is, the good thing was, I was able to make my title, my core memorable. So people were asking that GMTMC, and I was like, I will give it for 1 lakh rupees. So that's the idea you want as a speaker. You want people to start parroting your message, your title, your whatever you want to parrot. Memorability. Actionability is the call to action. Alright, so let's recap as we are about to enter the Q&A phase. We discussed that a story is all about change. If a character was कि मैं ऐसा हुआ करता था, फिर कुछ हुआ, अब मैं ऐसा हूँ, that is, I used to be someone who used to believe that public speaking is hard, then something happened, now I own the stage. If that emotional shift happens, the emotional delta is presented, it becomes a story. Else, it's an anecdote. And ideally, you want a story. We discussed that a story at the macro level is a saga of staging, dramatics, and payoff. The staging is the technicals, the cinematography, the location, the characters, the circumstance, the 3 C's: curiosity, characters, and circumstance. The technical bit. And since the technicals do not matter as much as the emotional, often the technicals happen in the very first minute. You make them curious, you bring in the characters, and you set the circumstance of where the story is playing out. In the very first minute. If you drag this, audience will be like, what is the intention? So this is why we don't advise you to drag it. Set it fast so that you can get in the meat of your story, which is the last 3 C's. The conflict. Remember, the conflict will take the majority of your story, of your speech. And the reason it will take majority is, we don't want you to use elevator conflict, where the conflict just happens. We don't want you to walk into conflict where the speech ends and you're over time. We want you to use escalating conflict, where you bring in a smaller conflict at first, and the conflict escalates to a point where the audience is now rooting for you, and this is where the climax happens. The climax is when your problem finally gets solved. And who solves your problem? The guru. And the 5th comes in cure. Remember, even in Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, the cure comes from the bride's father when he says that Jeevan Zindagi. So he's the one who ultimately solves the equation, not Shah Rukh Khan himself. The idea is that we always try to bring the character realization from external source. Once the cure comes in, you have changed emotionally. Now you want to bring the change. So the cure and the change happens, payoff. Change is when you say that ultimately I start realizing that I too have a voice. My voice is powerless, something that's right. And then there's a payoff where you tell the audience some call to action that next time when you find yourself in a situation where you feel powerless, remember you are the power. That's call to action. Thank you. So that's the 6C model. Staging, dramatics, payoff, which could be broken into the 3 C's of technicals: curiosity, circumstance, characters, and conflict, cure, and change. Apart from this, we also discussed about the discovery, realization, and application model. The idea is very simple. You bring in 3 stories. In the first story, you discover a message, study, or else opportunity won't respect you. But you're like, I don't get it. I'm too young. Realization. When your life has progressed, but now you're forced to realize the importance of that message, that as it's not studying, opportunity did not respect me. Application is when now this application also has its own subset. I won't go there because now we have got Q&A, but the idea of application is when you, after realization, you start applying, right? Because humans start applying stuff when something changes internally inside them. If I realize that if I have to wake, for example, it's been 2 years now, I don't eat after 6 p.m. I used to be very, very obese in 2023 Toastmasters. One of my friends called me a bear, Bhalu. And I said, अब मुझे भालू बनने मिला यार. For some reason, 2 years I have food cravings. I've been able to overcome it. So the thing is, once human changes from inside, you keep on doing that, right? That's application. That's when you say that after applying that realization, how your life has changed. You do that so that the audience is real then. The audience say, okay, इसके बाद हुआ ना, हम भी change होंगे. And now you will do the payoff. So the discovery, realization, application, again, psychological dance. We discuss all about the ethos, pathos, logos. You want the audience to make you look credible. You want the audience to feel the emotional pull, and then you bring them a logic as well. The ARM model, the actionable, relatable, memorable. Remember, most of this stuff is all revolving around a common truth. The common truth is reel the audience in, make them stay, and change them. But at least give them a way to change them. Give them an idea, a message. And because before we end this content part, let me just review. Because as a speaker, your biggest win comes when your audience's life changes after your speech. If even a single person comes up and says, from today I'm going to take public speaking seriously, because all these years I haven't, you have done your job. Public speaking foremost is service, and then anything else. Now let's open for Q&A, and at the end I will just bring the last part. The Q&A, any questions around what we discussed? Storytelling model, DRM, discovery, realization, application, or any questions you have around public speaking, around speech delivery, around stage presence.
I have one question. Fellow Toastmasters has given to ask me because he's not really here. He is looking for some techniques to write humorous speeches.
Absolutely. So in public speaking, we have a mantra we use. Don't add humor, uncover humor. Now what is adding humor? Let's say in my speech I'm talking about public speaking and I have a conflict that, hey, I want to go on the stage and suddenly I realize that I can't do it. Then I went, but before this, let me do a Santa Banta joke. And Santa went to Banta and he said this. Out of nowhere, if I bring in a joke, in a serious speech, or in any speech, do like, go again. That's called adding humor. Most speakers try to add humor. They try to force fit some humor into the canvas of the speech. The idea is to uncover humor. What is uncovering humor. Okay, before I go into more uncovering part, you know the difference between humor and comedy? The difference between humor and comedy? Or do you think it's the same?
No, I think humor is what you mentioned, uncovering humors in your normal conversations. Comedy is something which is scripted.
No, even humor can be scripted. But there's a difference, again, by purely technical standards. There's a difference between humor and comedy. Alright, so have you watched the show Office on Pitch Kapoor? Do you think it's a humorous show or comedy show?
Humorous.
Humorous.
Why? It's a humorous show, yes. But why? It's not a comedy show.
They're not forcing comedy, I believe.
That's in comedy. Anubhav Bassi's stand-up is comedy, but it is not being forced. People laugh because they want to laugh. There's a reason why we have humorous speech contests in Toastmasters, not comedy speech contest. Humor ultimately is built upon wisdom. Humor has a message. Office actually talks about a very serious thing in India, corruption. But they do it in a way which makes you laugh. That's called uncovering humor. You take regular events from your life, breakups, job loss, corruption, a democratic election rigging, you fumbling on stage, serious things. People's lives get affected by this. But you bring in a humorous perspective. Humor is all about perspective. All about perspective. And that is what we call uncovering humor. Remember that there is a very famous quote from one of the from Mark Twain that humor is wisdom at its finest. Because wisdom, if you just give wisdom to the audience, the entire 60 model I discussed, the entire idea is to give wisdom in a way the audience can absorb. So if I just come on here and say, Toastmasters, you have to be on stage today. I tell you that stage is, or if I say that Toastmasters, you have to be confident. Just be confident. You have to be more charismatic. I just keep on giving you, you have to be. People will reject that message. That the entire idea of the 60 model is to make that message drip fed to your audience in a way they can absorb it. The idea of humor is something. You guise your wisdom, your message in a humorous world. And the idea is that if you give something to the audience, if you make them laugh, they are more receptive to your message at the end. Give and take. So, to answer that question, uncover humor, do not add humor. Look at regular events in your life and think, how can I make it humorous? In my humorous speech that I won in district came second, I took the roles of R counter, grammarian, and timer, and I took it with a humorous twist. That's all. People were laughing at the heart's all. I told that I started timing girlfriend. After say 5 minutes, I used to time her, and she ultimately broke with me. I started grammar checking my boss, who was a French boss, and ultimately he gave me -6% promotion appraisal for next 10 years. I went to a hospital and I saw this mom and baby. Mom was saying we were saying and I started noting their as our counter. So then I got a message that I was about to leave Toastmasters because I was fed up with me being so much fed up, so much ingrained into our system. But then I saw a video. It was a video about me practicing in my room. Because 2 years back I did not have the confidence to practice on stage. It was an actual story. I used to practice in front of a mobile. And then I realized that Toastmaster may have given me -6% appraisal, lost girlfriend, and a mom and baby who will always abuse me for the rest of her life. But Toastmaster has given me confidence. And at the end, I end with a message. That's the humorous speech in action. If I do not bring in a message in my humorous speech, I lose the context. The idea is it has to have a message. So that's the idea. You take regular things from your life, just flip the perspective. Any question apart from this? Does that answer the question?
Question: how much acting should we put in that humorous speech contest or any speech? It should not be look dramatic also, and it should be like clear.
as much as it feels natural to you. Dramatization is not required beyond a certain limit in Toastmasters. It's not a dramatic skill, it's a speech. A speech is a collection of three things: statements, engagement, and the dialogue is okay, stage play, engagement, and statements. Three things. In fact, there's this world champion, President Vasilev. You see that when you write a speech, write in a poetic form firstly, it will help you, make you remember your speech better. So instead of writing paragraphs, write your speeches in, let's say, max 5 words per line. That's one aspect. But he always also asks you to color code your speeches. Color code your speeches into three things: engagement, stage play, and statements. Engagement is the questions you ask. Anything with the word you is engagement. Stage play is dialogues. And statement is majority part of your speech. 60% of your speech is statements. 20-30% is stage play, 10% is engagement. But see this, stage play is actually much less than statements. A regular speech is not supposed to be a dramatics demonstration. So you don't need to be too much dramatic. If it feels unnatural to you, don't do this. While I was contesting in international speech contest in the last 3 years, at some point I got so much enamored by these world champions, I stopped being me on stage. And one of my friends told me that, Pulkit, your speeches don't feel as intimate anymore because you are trying to be someone who you are not. I will give you this advice, friends: never be someone who you are not. Be you. And if it feels unnatural to you, don't do this. There's this lady, Nidhi Sani, she's from District 24, and she has been to semi-finals and she has won district 3 times back to back. She's natural dramatics person. She also came to all Toastmasters meet. But it feels natural to her. If I do that, people will see me as a joker. I don't do that. So, if it feels natural to you, do it. If it feels unnatural to you, don't do it. That's my experience living advice. Does that answer? Any other question?
So books or individuals who can we read or watch?
Sure. Many world champions, so in Toastmasters every year a new world champion is chosen. Many world champions have written their books. Craig Valentine has his own course. If you go to Craig Valentine's website, he has this 52-week course. You sign up and he sends you one voice note every week. There's this book from Manoj Vasudevan, who is the 2017 world champion. His basically book is How to Become a World Champion of Speaking. That's the entire title of the book. Then this book by Randy Harvey. I would actually recommend Randy Harvey's book, which is 101 Public Speaking Messages That Matter. Because since he's a literature PhD, he breaks down speeches to the core about using all those rhetorical devices, Genesis threads, tabletop model, all that. They all see behind the jargons, everything is very simple. Tabletop model simply say that your message should be at the table and they should be supporting stories. That's it. So behind the jargons, everything is simple. But if you read his book, you will realize what true speech mastery is. Then this book by Vikas Chandran, who is the 2007 world champion, and the book is titled Emote. And the entire idea of the book is to teach you how to bring emotions effectively in your speeches. Brilliant people. Regular people like you and me. In Toastmasters, the world champions just people you and me. They used to be at Toastmaster clubs. They just rose up to world champions. Since they are regular people like you and me, right? Those articles, those books just feel more real. There's a saying public speaking that if you make yourself similar to your audiences, you become special to them. If you become special to your audience, Or if you try to be special, like, I was born with this huge oration gift. I'm as intelligent as Ramanujan. I can climb Mount Everest without putting a sweat. If you try to boast yourself, the audience disregards you. So be similar to be special. And since these world champions are similar to you and I, these books actually will hit you differently. So Vikas Jigran, Manoj Vasudevan, then there's Craig Valentine's course. Do go through them. It will actually help you. Any other question around one or two last questions we can take? Anything around public speaking? Your queries or doubts?
How to choose a topic? Because sometimes it's difficult to choose topics. So how to choose? Because as to come and speak, because it's about families, about our personal stories, or it could be anything.
The reason we say personal stories and reasons, Jitendra, reason personal stories we say is because it drip feeds your message to the audience. See, the idea is to give your message to the audience, but we want the blow to be soft. We don't want to be preachy. We don't want to enroll them. So do bring personal stories, Jitendra. Second, and this is why evaluators keep on saying that, it works. It simply works. Humor also works, for example. The second is how to choose a topic. It's tough. Every year when contest comes in, I feel like an imposter. कुछ आ ही नहीं रहा है. कुछ मतलब क्या पिछले साल जीत गया तो वो एक्सेंट था क्या? It comes to my mind day in day out. It took me 2 months to build that humorous speech, but today I'm very happy that I'm calling it. But next year when the contest comes, I will still be confused. अब कहाँ से लाऊं? क्या वो ठीक था क्या? So topic selection is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for you. But there's this mental model we recommend to use, that ask yourself that if after your speech delivery, you get off the stage and you get to know that this was the last speech you would ever give, what is the one message that you want the audience to know? So let's say before you go on the stage, someone comes and says, hey Jitendra, sorry to let you know, but this is the last speech you will ever give. You have to go to, let's say, Mars from today, or anything. It will be more serious. I don't want to do the serious part. So, if someone tells you this is the last speech you will ever give, what is the one message you want to leave your audience with? It could be 3 messages as well, but you think about those top 2 or top 3 messages that you want the world to know, because you have lived through it. You have painstakingly learned it. And if your children, your grandchildren, your generations watch that video from 50 years from now, and if they watch that one message, you'll be happy that at least I get that message. That's a good way to start narrowing down the message close to you. That's one mental model. It will take some reflection. Just ask yourself that if there is one message that I can give, which will ultimately go on to be viewed by my children, my grandchildren, my generations to come, it will be on YouTube and the world will watch. What is one message that comes from me that I will be happy enough that at least I got this out? This will help you start narrowing it down.
But even apart from the contest, if we talk about pathway speeches, we have the objectives, but still, sometimes we struggle to figure out which story to, bring about to match with that pathway's objectives. So, any suggestions on that?
Again, your name is Rashi. Again, it's all about perspective. You can bring one story, and there could be 10 different perspectives on it. Because pathway speeches are more loose-ended. They are like practice grounds. The contest is more high stakes, especially if you're eyeing for the top spots. Use the pathway speeches as an experimental ground. Be more experimental ground. But yes, you can take one story and there will be 10 different perspectives. For example, going on ultimately realizing that your you belong on the stage. It could be a story about being patient and resilient. It could be about a story about you discovering your voice. It could be a story about you winning over your internal negative self-voice. It could be a story about you finally doing something that you want or the world wants you to do. There could be so many perspectives on a single story. So force filter. Not force filter, just think critically think about it, Rashi. And you can then wedge that story into part of the speech. It's more experimental, so you can be more to play around. We take one last question before we end the session. I think what's the time right now?
Yeah, it's 1 hour 5 minutes.
Okay. We'll do one last question.
Just one question. How many stories, personal stories we should accommodate in the artist speech? Like if I'm giving some example of some speech, so how many my personal story I can take in that speech?
Great question. Great question. The idea is simple. Either you bring one long story or you bring max 3 short ones. There's something about 3 in public speaking.
Power of three.
Power of 3, there's something about that. If I say big and beautiful, nah. If I say big, beautiful, bold, it just feels more complete. There's a psychological feel about 3. So this is why if you watch Mohammad Khatami's 2015 winning speech, Power of Words, he has 3 stories. In fact, he has 2 stories, one anecdote. The second one is I wrote to watch the speech. But if you watch Aaron Beverly's 2019 winning speech, it's a speech about Judas Chupai. So he comes to India and he goes to a friend's wedding, and it's an entire speech about Judas Chupai. You won't believe how he spells that message. I'll just take 20 seconds there. He actually brings in Judas Chupai's story to relay the message that since the family was between American people and Indian people, and he was a black man. So he said that towards the end he realized that in a family, in an American family and Indian family, he was accepted as their own because they actually got him into Judas Chupai game. Because the idea of Judas Chupai game is for the grooms and bride's family know each other. That's the Indian tradition. So he said that in an American and Indian family, they actually got him to play that game because he was accepted as one of their own. And the message was that in a divided world, there are still people who believe in inclusivity. I'm not able to do justice to the message. He did it wonderfully well, and he won. Imagine taking perspective. Imagine bringing a Judas Chupai game to advocate world peace.
And he was also in the attire.
Indian attire. That's technicals. Props is technicals. So either you bring one big story, a Judas Chupai story, which ends with the message, or you bring 3 short ones. That's the trial test. Alright, so I will end with this. We are at 1:06:17. My last advice to you for today will be that worry bigger. If you have ever worried about being on stage, if you have ever got any inkling that am I looking good for the stage? It happens. I was on stage and there was this young couple I saw, they were actually looking at me and because I dressed very fairly, right? So they were looking at me and they were laughing. But the thing was, since I have reached a point where my focus is on audience mode, I'm able to now sail through. The thing is worry bigger. Don't worry about how you look. Don't worry about how you sound. Don't worry about is your message part is important. Don't worry about the uncontrollables. Worry bigger. Worry if your message is being delivered in the right fashion. Worry if your audience can understand your message. Worry if after your speech ends, will their life change? Because if you look from the audience's perspective, often they don't care about how you look or sound. They do care that if they're investing those 5-7 minutes, 1 hour or 2 hours they get value for their time. So once you worry big, when you worry from the audience's perspective, you will invest in making your messages better. You will invest in making your speech structure in a way that the audience will to absorb. You will worry about using constructs like rhetorical devices to make your message stick. You will worry about changing their life. So worry from the audience's perspective, and you realize public speaking at its core is service. Communicate to not impress, communicate to deliver your message. Flip the script, worry bigger, worry from the audience's perspective, and all that we discussed today is to help you make speeches that can give the audience the feeling of finality, give the audience feeling of time well invested. Technicals and knowledge is all about, at the end, delivering a message that sticks. And that's how I will end today's speech crafting session. That's your why. Your why is to write speeches that stick.